The morning city buzzed with its usual rhythm, the streets alive with hurried footsteps and the occasional honk of impatient drivers. Raymond sat on a bench near the corner of Maple Street, a coffee shop at his back. His coat, patched at the elbows, shielded him poorly from the November chill. As people bustled by, he tried not to dwell on his hunger or the ache in his legs from sleeping on the cold ground the night before. Then, something unusual caught his eye. Lying near the curb was a wallet, slightly scuffed but clearly of good quality. It stood out against the wet pavement like a beacon. Raymond glanced around, wondering if someone would notice and come back for it, but no one did. Pushing himself off the bench, he limped over and picked it up. The leather was smooth, heavy with its contents. He opened it cautiously, revealing a neatly organized stack of cash, credit cards, and a driver's license tucked into one of the pockets. The license bore the name Peter Ashton, accompanied by a photograph of a man in his 50s with sharp features and a confident smile. Raymond's gaze lingered on the money for a moment, more cash than he had seen in years, let alone held in his hands. For a fleeting moment, he imagined what that money could do for him. A few nights in a motel, warm meals, clean clothes, maybe even a chance to get back on his feet. But the thought didn't sit right with him. His parents had raised him to value honesty, and despite everything life had thrown at him, that part of his upbringing had never left him. "This isn't mine," he muttered to himself, tucking the wallet into his coat. Raymond approached a newsstand at the corner and held up the driver's license. "You recognize this guy?" he asked the vendor, a wiry man with graying hair. The vendor squinted at the ID and nodded. "Peter Ashton?" "Yeah, I know the name. He's the guy behind Ashton Furniture, big deal in these parts. His office is in Ashton Tower, just a few blocks from here. Can't miss it." Raymond thanked him and started walking, the wallet pressing against his chest. His patched shoes slipped slightly on the wet sidewalk as he navigated through the busy streets. The temptation of the cash weighed on him, but he shook the thought away. The Ashton Tower soon came into view, a gleaming glass structure that stood taller than most of the buildings around it. The entrance was flanked by revolving doors, with smartly dressed employees moving in and out like clockwork. Raymond hesitated at the base of the steps, looking up at the polished facade. He felt out of place in his worn clothes and muddy shoes. "It's just returning a wallet," he told himself, taking a deep breath. "That's all. That's all." Inside, the lobby was as grand as he had imagined: marble floors, high ceilings, and a chandelier that sparkled like 1,000 diamonds. A receptionist sat behind a sleek desk, her blazer immaculate. Her eyes flickered briefly to Raymond, curiosity crossing her face. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone professional but cautious. I found this wallet," Raymond said, pulling it from his coat. "It belongs to Peter Ashton. I wanted to return it to him." The receptionist blinked, clearly surprised. "One moment, please," she said, picking up the phone. After a brief, murmured conversation, she nodded. "Mr. Ashton will be down shortly. You can wait over there." Raymond took a seat in one of the plush chairs by the window. He sat stiffly, conscious of his shabby appearance against the polished elegance of the surroundings. Minutes later, the elevator doors opened and a man stepped out. Peter Ashton was just as he appeared in his ID photo: tall, well-groomed, and commanding in his presence. His tailored suit spoke of wealth, but his expression was warm and approachable as he walked toward Raymond. "You found my wallet?" Peter asked, his voice calm and even. Raymond stood and handed it over. "Yes, sir. I saw it on the street and thought I'd bring it back to you." Peter opened the wallet, quickly checking its contents before looking back at Raymond. "Everything seems to be here. Thank you. Not everyone would go out of their way to do this." Raymond shifted uncomfortably under the man's gaze. It just seemed like the right thing to do. Peter's eyes lingered on Raymond for a moment, taking in his worn coat and tired expression. "Well," he said, tucking the wallet into his jacket, "I'm grateful. Let me know if there's ever anything I can do for you." With a polite nod, Peter turned back toward the elevators, leaving Raymond standing in the grand lobby. As Raymond stepped outside into the bustling street, he felt a strange mix of emotions. He hadn't expected thanks or recognition, but something about Peter's parting words stuck with him. For now, though, his focus was on finding his next meal and a place to rest. Returning the wallet had been the right thing to do, even if it didn't solve his immediate problems. What Raymond didn't realize was that his small act of honesty had set something in motion, something that would change his life in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Raymond spent the rest of the day much like any other, walking the streets and searching for ways to make it through. He had grown used to the routines of the city, how people avoided eye contact, how a few kind souls offered loose change or leftover food, and how the nights always felt colder than they should. That evening, he found himself back at the shelter where he often slept when space was available. It was a crowded place, with rows of narrow cots and the air heavy with exhaustion and despair. As he settled into his cot, his thoughts returned to the morning, the wallet, Peter Ashton. The strange look the man had given him before walking away. Raymond couldn't shake the feeling that there had been something unsaid, as though Peter had been thinking about more than just the wallet. The next morning, as Raymond shuffled out of the shelter, the sharp November wind hit him hard. He hunched his shoulders and headed toward the corner where he sometimes found odd jobs cleaning windows, carrying boxes, or sweeping storefronts. It wasn't much, but it kept him moving forward, one slow step at a time. He was just about to approach a small grocery store to ask for work when a black sedan pulled up to the curb. The tinted window on the passenger side rolled down, revealing a man in a sharp gray suit. "Are you Raymond Carter?" the man asked, his tone polite but firm. Raymond blinked in surprise. "Yeah, that's me." The man smiled faintly. "Mr. Ashton would like to speak with you. Can you spare a few minutes?" Raymond hesitated. His first instinct was to refuse, unsure of what this was about. But the man's demeanor wasn't threatening, and curiosity got the better of him. "All right," he said, stepping toward the car. The man opened the door and gestured for Raymond to get in. As the car glided through the streets, Raymond couldn't help but feel out of place against the luxurious leather seats and quiet hum of the engine. They arrived at Ashton Tower, and Raymond was led through a different entrance this time, bypassing the grand lobby. The suited man guided him into a private elevator, which whisked them upward. When the doors opened, Raymond found himself in a spacious office with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of the city. Peter Ashton stood by the windows, his hands in his pockets. He turned as they entered, smiling warmly. "Raymond, thank you for coming. Please have a seat." Raymond sat cautiously in one of the plush chairs across from Peter's desk. "What's this about?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Peter walked over and leaned against his desk, studying Raymond for a moment. "I've been thinking about our meeting yesterday," he began. "What you did returning my wallet without asking for anything in return isn't something I see every day." "I just did what anyone would have done," Raymond replied, though he wasn't sure if he believed it himself. Peter shook his head. "I don't think that's true. And even if it were, it's something worth recognizing." He straightened and gestured toward a small folder on the desk. "I asked around a bit. I wanted to know more about you." Raymond stiffened. "Why?" Peter smiled reassuringly. "Not to pry, I promise. I just felt there was more to your story. I learned about the repair shop you worked at, the eviction. You've been dealt a rough hand, Raymond. But the way you handled yourself yesterday, when no one would have known if you kept the money, tells me you're the kind of person who deserves a second chance." Raymond frowned, unsure of where this was going. "I'm not looking for pity," he said firmly. "I just did what I thought was right." "I understand," Peter said, his tone sincere. "And this isn't about pity, it's about opportunity." Before Raymond could respond, Peter opened the folder and pulled out a slip of paper. "I'd like to offer you a temporary job here at Ashton Furniture. Nothing fancy, just something to get you back on your feet." Raymond stared at him in disbelief. You're offering me a job. Peter nodded. I can see you're a hard worker. And I believe in helping people who show integrity. The position's in our warehouse: manual labor, steady hours, decent pay. It's not glamorous, but it's a start. Raymond's mind raced. It sounded too good to be true. Why would you do this for me? Peter smiled. Because someone gave me a chance once when I needed it. And because you reminded me yesterday of how important it is to pay that forward. Raymond sat in stunned silence, his emotions warring within him. Part of him wanted to refuse, to avoid the risk of being let down again. But another part, the part that still held on to hope, wanted to say yes. I don't know what to say, he murmured. Peter reached out and shook his hand. Just say you'll show up tomorrow. I'll have my assistant get you set up with everything you need. As Raymond left Ashton Tower that day, a new sense of possibility took root in his heart. It wasn't just about the job. It was about the fact that someone had seen value in him when he had nearly forgotten it himself. For the first time in years, Raymond felt like he was moving toward something rather than running from everything. He didn't know where this new path would lead, but he was ready to find out. The next morning, Raymond stood outside the Ashton Furniture Warehouse, a mix of nerves and determination swirling in his chest. The building was enormous, with rows of loading docks and workers bustling in and out. For the first time in years, he felt like he belonged somewhere, or at least had a chance to. The day before, Peter's assistant had walked him through the basics, giving him a small packet with work details and instructions. He had also been handed a set of work clothes and boots, which Raymond now wore. Though they were simple, the clean, sturdy uniform felt like a symbol of a fresh start. Hey, are you the new guy? A gruff but friendly voice interrupted Raymond's thoughts. He turned to see a burly man with a clipboard and a thick beard walking toward him. Yeah, I'm Raymond Carter. The man extended a hand. Mike. I'm the warehouse supervisor. Good to have you on board. You'll be working with the shipping team today. Let me show you the ropes. Raymond followed Mike into the warehouse, taking in the organized chaos of forklifts, conveyor belts, and towering shelves of inventory. Despite the noise and activity, there was a sense of order or rhythm that everyone seemed to follow. Mike introduced him to a small team responsible for loading trucks with furniture for delivery. The work was physically demanding, requiring him to lift heavy boxes and stack them precisely. By midday, sweat dripped from his brow, and his arms ached. But it felt good, honest, productive work that made him feel alive in a way he hadn't in years. During a break, he sat on a stack of pallets, sipping water from a bottle provided by the company. One of his co-workers, a younger man named Luis, sat down next to him. First day? Huh? Luis asked, grinning. Yeah, Raymond said, catching his breath. It's been a while since I've worked like this. You're doing all right, Luis said. Better than some of the guys who start here. You stick with it, and you'll get used to the pace. Raymond nodded, grateful for the encouragement. As the day wore on, he found himself falling into the rhythm Mike had described. The team moved efficiently, and Raymond's efforts didn't go unnoticed. At the end of the shift, as the warehouse lights dimmed, Mike approached him again. Not bad for your first day, he said. You keep this up, and you'll fit in just fine. Raymond thanked him, and stepped outside. The cool evening air a welcome relief after the heat of the warehouse. For the first time in years, he had earned a paycheck, something he hadn't thought possible just days ago. As he walked toward the shelter where he was staying, Raymond thought about how far he had come in such a short time. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and it gave him a foothold to start rebuilding his life. Over the next few weeks, Raymond settled into the routine of the warehouse. The work remained tough, but he grew stronger and more confident with each passing day. His co-workers warmed to him, and he found himself laughing at their jokes and sharing stories during breaks. One day, as he was finishing his shift, Peter Ashton appeared in the warehouse. Dressed more casually than the first time Raymond had seen him, Peter walked through the rows of shelves, greeting workers and asking questions about operations. When Peter spotted Raymond, he smiled and walked over. "How's it going, Raymond?" Raymond wiped his hands on his pants, feeling a bit self-conscious. "Good, sir. I'm getting the hang of things." "Glad to hear it," Peter said. He glanced around the warehouse before lowering his voice slightly. "I've been keeping tabs on your progress. Mike tells me you're one of the hardest workers he's got." Raymond felt a swell of pride. "I'm just trying to do my best." Peter nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I knew you had it in you. Keep this up and we'll see about moving you up the ladder. But for now, I want you to know you've got people rooting for you." Raymond was taken aback by Peter's words. It wasn't just the job or the opportunity, it was the belief that someone saw potential in him, even when he had doubted himself. That night, as Raymond lay on his cot in the shelter, he thought about the road ahead. He was far from where he wanted to be, but for the first time in years he felt like he was moving forward. What he didn't know was that Peter Ashton had more plans for him. Plans that would take this simple act of kindness and transform it into something far greater than either of them could have imagined. A month into his new job, Raymond's life was starting to feel more stable than it had in years. The warehouse job was grueling, but it was honest work, and the regular paychecks allowed him to save up enough for small but significant changes. He rented a tiny room in a shared boarding house, giving him a place to call his own. He also began buying healthier meals and better clothes, small steps toward reclaiming his dignity. Peter Ashton's occasional visits to the warehouse became a highlight of Raymond's week. Peter had a way of making everyone feel seen and appreciated, whether it was a quick joke or a genuine thank you for their hard work. While Raymond appreciated Peter's kindness, he couldn't help but wonder why the businessman seemed so invested in his progress. One Friday afternoon, Peter invited Raymond to lunch. They walked to a nearby diner, where the smell of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air. Once seated, Peter leaned forward, his expression warm but serious. "You've been doing great at the warehouse," Peter began. "Mike says you're reliable, hardworking, and a positive influence on the team." Raymond shifted uncomfortably. "I'm just doing my part," he said modestly. Peter smiled. "I know you are, but I see more in you than just a warehouse worker. I've been thinking about your background, how you used to work in a repair shop. That kind of skill isn't something you lose, and I'd like to help you use it again." Raymond frowned, unsure of what Peter meant. "I don't follow." Peter pulled a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table. Inside were blueprints and documents for a community workshop project Ashton Furniture had been quietly funding. "This is an idea I've been toying with for a while," Peter explained. "It's a community space where people can learn basic repair skills, furniture, appliances, even simple carpentry. It's meant to help people who can't afford to replace things every time they break, and I think you'd be perfect to help run it." Raymond blinked, taken aback. "Me? I don't know anything about running a project like this." "You know more than you think," Peter replied. "You have the skills, the work ethic, and most importantly, the empathy to connect with people. I'd provide the funding, the space, and a team to help get it started. You'd be in charge of the day-to-day operations, teaching workshops and mentoring others." Raymond stared at the folder, his heart pounding. The idea of helping others the way Peter had helped him was compelling, but self-doubt crept in. What if I mess it up? What if I can't handle it? Peter's voice was firm but kind. "Raymond, everyone doubts themselves at some point, but you've already proven you're capable of turning your life around. This is your chance to keep going, to give back and build something meaningful." For the rest of the lunch, they discussed the details of the workshop. By the time they parted ways, Raymond's initial hesitation had given way to cautious excitement. The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Peter's team secured a vacant storefront near the warehouse and outfitted it with tools, workbenches, and supplies. Raymond worked tirelessly alongside the crew, assembling shelves and organizing materials. On the workshop's opening day, Raymond stood at the front of the room, nervously welcoming the first group of participants. Some were young adults eager to learn practical skills, others were older, seeking ways to save money by repairing household items themselves. The first few sessions were challenging as Raymond adjusted to his new role, but he quickly found his rhythm. Teaching came naturally to him, and he discovered a deep sense of fulfillment in helping others learn. One afternoon, as Raymond guided a teenager through repairing a wobbly chair, Peter stopped by to check on the workshop. He stood quietly in the corner, watching as Raymond patiently explained each step of the process. "You're a natural," Peter said later, as the two shared a cup of coffee in the break room. Raymond smiled, a rare confidence shining through. "I never thought I'd be doing something like this. It feels good. Like I'm finally where I'm supposed to be." Peter nodded. "You are. And this is just the beginning." The workshop quickly became a community hub, with word spreading about the free classes and the sense of camaraderie Raymond had fostered. Local businesses began donating supplies, and volunteers from the neighborhood joined to help with larger projects. For Raymond, the transformation was more than just external. Each day he felt a little more like the person he used to be before life knocked him down, and maybe even someone better. Though he didn't know it yet, the seeds of the workshop would grow into something far greater than he and Peter had imagined, touching countless lives in the years to come. For now, though, Raymond focused on each small victory, one repaired chair or mended heart at a time. A year after the workshop's opening, it was no longer just a quiet community initiative. Raymond's repair workshop had gained recognition across the city, becoming a model for community-driven programs. People from all walks of life came to learn, contribute, or simply share stories over cups of coffee brewed in the corner. For many, it was more than a place to fix broken items, it was a sanctuary. A space where everyone felt valued. For Raymond, it was a dream he hadn't known he had. The routine of teaching and mentoring filled his days with purpose, and the connections he formed with others warmed his soul in a way he hadn't felt in years. He no longer lived in the boarding house. With a steady income and the workshop's growing success, he had moved into a modest but comfortable apartment. One evening, as Raymond was locking up for the day, he noticed a man lingering outside the workshop's front door. He was middle-aged, with tired eyes and a worn coat, his hands stuffed deep into his pockets against the chill. "Can I help you?" Raymond asked, stepping closer. The man hesitated, then gestured toward the sign above the door. "This place, people say you help folks here. I've been out of work for months. I don't have much to offer, but I'm pretty good with tools. If you need an extra hand, I'd do anything: sweeping floors, fixing stuff, whatever you need." Raymond recognized the desperation in the man's voice. It mirrored how he had felt standing outside Ashton Tower that day, clutching a stranger's wallet and wondering if doing the right thing would make any difference. "Come inside," Raymond said, unlocking the door again. "Let's talk." Over the next hour, the man, whose name was Glenn, shared his story. He had been a construction worker before an injury sidelined him. Unable to keep up with the demands of his job, he had lost his home and his confidence. Raymond listened intently, nodding as he heard echoes of his own struggles in Glenn's words. "We've all been there," Raymond said when Glenn finished. "You're not alone. If you're willing to learn and put in the effort, I think we can find a place for you here." Glenn's eyes widened. "Really? You'd give me a shot?" Raymond smiled. "Someone gave me a shot when I needed it most. It's only fair I do the same." As Glenn left that evening, a small spark of hope visible in his eyes, Raymond felt a deep sense of gratitude. His journey from the streets to running the workshop had come full circle. Now, he had the opportunity to extend the same kindness he had received to others in need. Weeks later, during a small anniversary celebration for the workshop, Peter Ashton arrived with a surprise. He handed Raymond an envelope, his signature warm smile on his face. Raymond opened it cautiously, revealing a letter and a deed. His eyes widened as he realized what it meant. The workshop space, which had been leased under Ashton Furniture's name, was now his. "I've seen what you've built here," Raymond Peter said. "It's become more than I ever imagined. This place belongs to you now, officially and completely. It's your legacy." Raymond's voice caught in his throat. "Peter, I don't know what to say." "Just keep doing what you're doing," Peter replied. "That's thanks enough." The celebration continued, filled with laughter and gratitude from the many lives Raymond had touched. Glenn, now a regular at the workshop, raised a toast, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "To second chances," Glenn said, looking directly at Raymond. "And to the man who proves that one act of kindness can change everything." As the crowd cheered and clinked their glasses, Raymond stood quietly for a moment, reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought him here. He thought back to the day he had found Peter Ashton's wallet, and how a simple decision to return it had sparked a chain of events he could never have predicted. From a cold bench on the street to the warmth of a thriving community, his life had transformed in ways he hadn't dared to dream. And now, with the workshop flourishing and new opportunities to help others unfolding each day, Raymond knew his story was far from over. He had built something lasting not just for himself but for everyone who walked through the doors of the workshop. For Raymond Carter, it all came down to one truth: kindness wasn't just a fleeting act. It was a force that could ripple outward, changing lives in ways both big and small. And he was living proof of how powerful those ripples could be.